Britain and Germany are joining the international fight against Islamic State in Syria. Just hours after Britain's parliament authorized airstrikes this week, UK jets dropped bombs on ISIL targets in Syria, and the German parliament approved air and naval support on Friday, including plans to deploy up to 1,200 non-combat soldiers to the region. The move comes after calls for solidarity from France. But will military action provoke even more violence and anti-Western sentiment around the world? Well, joining us now to discuss this is Patricia DeGennaro. She's a senior fellow at the World Policy Institute here in Washington, D.C. From Florida, we're joined by John Schindler. He's a strategist and author who spent much of his career as an intelligence analyst and counterintelligence officer for the U.S. National Security Agency. Also with us in the studio in Washington, D.C. is Sam Husseini. He's a writer, political activist, and communications director for the Institute for Public Accuracy. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Patricia, the United Kingdom, as we just mentioned, joining the fight against Islamic State in Syria. Germany voted to play a non-combat role, and of course we already have France, the United States, and Russia bombing the place already.
Right.
To what end? What's the point of all this?
That's a really good question. I spoke to a lot of officials yesterday in the Obama administration, and it just seems that there really isn't an end state that they have in mind. This continued bombing is only fracturing more and more people in the area, causing more and more volatility between communities and others. And I think in the long run, it's just going to produce more people joining Daesh or this entity or other entities of extremism, because they're so disgruntled and so tired of just this long scale all-out war that's being held on their territory. Oh, absolutely. It's already been counterproductive. We've seen that in Iraq, that it's been completely counterproductive. Afghanistan as well is returning back to the way it was before we started the bombing campaign there. And so I think we need to rethink our policies, rethink our strategies and alliances, and see how we can better help the governance structure and the people, so we don't have to be destroying, large-scale countries like that's happening now.
John, what is your view on this? We heard some time ago, many months ago, President Obama tell us that the intention was to degrade and destroy. Is this going to happen? Is this achievable with a war from the air?
No, and let me go back to what was just said, and let me emphasize the part that I agree with, which is that the Obama administration has neither a coherent strategy nor a coherent policy in its struggle with the Islamic State, which has been going on for well over a year now. We have heard a lot of talk about degrading, deterring. The reality is the multiple bombing campaigns going on, the American one, the American-led one by the West, that the British and Germans are joining in earnest now, has a lot of problems with targeting. It is not really having any strategic impact. The Russian campaign is not really against ISIS at all when you look at where the sorties are going. It's really aimed at buttressing the Assad regime, which is not at all the same thing as fighting ISIS, frankly. I don't agree that the bombing is making the situation worse. I think it's pretty awful as is, but I do think it's very fair to say that it's not clear what the West's or even Russia's agenda is here, in the sense of how does any of this actually defeat ISIS? That's not clear at all.
All right, Sam, and adding to this confusion is, on the one side, you have Russia and Iran, which is saying they support Bashar al-Assad, and you have the United States says that Bashar al-Assad must go. But at the same time, the United States is bombing ISIS, who are the enemies of Bashar al-Assad.
Right. I think one thing that you can say in defense of the Russians and the Iranians is that there seems to be some semblance of resemblance between their stated goals and their actual goals. They say that they want to defend the regime of Bashar al-Assad, and they seem to be acting that way. The United States government says that it wants to end ISIS, but doesn't have a policy that seems geared towards that. That might be a mistake. It might also be a calculation. It might be a Machiavellian move to keep this war going on, as seems to have been the case. Let's remember in the Iran-Iraq war, the United States at various points backed Iran and Iraq in a prolonged conflict that took 1 million lives. So we could see some manifestation of that here. There could be a method to this madness. I don't know we can say that conclusively, but I don't think we should dismiss this as simple bungling.
Patricia, John, I'm going to come to you in a moment. Let me go to Patricia.
Yeah.
This insistence on the part of the United States, Bashar al-Assad must go. Is that a mistake?
It's absolutely ludicrous. I mean, from the beginning, it was ludicrous. I mean, when I heard about the way the campaign was being developed in the region and from the military level, because I work with military planners occasionally, and in this particular instance, I knew well what was happening with the train and equip. You can't decide to overthrow a sitting governance leader and in the same time try to stamp out parts of actors that are acting within the population. It doesn't give the people any safety or anywhere to go or anyone to work with there if the situation got to the point which it has gotten to, where you have this grave humanitarian crisis and people leaving in the thousands. And so, I think the U.S. needs to put its money where its mouth is, basically, and its values. And if its values are democracy, it needs to work to that end. And you're not going to come to a democratic solution or a political solution with endless fighting and bombing. I mean, this is a slew of airstrikes on all kinds of targets. What is this country going to look like? After 5 years, we can see what it's looking like, and give it another where 3 or 4 more countries are joining, the fight with all of these lethal, very dangerous and radioactive materials that will be in the population and the environment forever. I think it was a mistake to try to oust Assad from the very beginning. And the actions of Ambassador Ford at that time to look at the demonstrators and help arm them and do these kinds of things is just counterproductive to allowing people to have safety to proceed to their own futures.
Again, it's counterproductive to the stated goals,
Yes.
which may not be the actual goals. I would contend that. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, let me go to John, and then I'll get to you, Sam. John, go ahead.
Several points here. One of which is we really shouldn't attribute to the Obama administration some sort of grand conspiracy when what really is a great deal of strategic confusion. Yes, the Obama administration has said they want Bashar al-Assad to go. And actually, I don't think Syria is going to move forward until we have some sort of transitional government. But the Obama administration doesn't mean it at all. This is just talk. Look, the reality is in September 2013, the Obama administration, when its self-proclaimed red line of chemical weapons use was crossed by the Assad regime, walked away from it, outsourced the problem to Vladimir Putin, and cast the die where we're in now, where Putin has made himself the salvation of the regime with de facto Western imprimatur. So this talk about the U.S. wants Assad to go is simply lip service to please Sunni Arab allies in the region. They don't mean it. And I don't view this as Machiavellianism. I view it as deep strategic confusion. And I'm as appalled as anyone who mentioned of thousands of refugees from Syria. It's millions of refugees. More Syrians have left than are still in the country. And very little of that is because of Western or even Russian bombing at this point. That's because of this horrific multi-sided civil war, which rivals now the catastrophe in the Congo in the late 1990s in terms of humanitarian horror show. But the reality is it's not the Obama administration wants one thing and does another. It doesn't even really know internally what it wants. It wants something that it can't have, which is some sort of transitional government that the Russians will effect for them. And the Russians, as was said with the Iranians, at least has a bit more clarity on what they say and what they do. And what they want to do is preserve the regime at almost any cost. And frankly, they are succeeding in doing that.
Right, Sam?
Yeah, well, we're not mind readers, but we can judge people on their actions. And the actions of the United States government, not just in terms of Syria, but over the last 15 years, have been to take 9/11, something perpetrated by violent Islamic extremists, and gone after a series of secular regimes. Now, any elementary look at that tells you that that's not a sensible response, except when you look at the trajectory of the policy. I mean, we have insiders from the administration said, okay, we're going to take this as an excuse to go after Iraq and Syria and so on. I don't think that, this throwing around this word conspiracy when what you're doing is analyzing what the policy is. In terms of the U.S. not going after Assad earlier, they built a case for that. I mean, Kerry certainly seemed like he was gung-ho for that 2 years ago, and there was an alliance from the left and the right that de facto seemed to prevent. There actually was something resembling a democratic process of discussing it in the Congress, and you had a left-right alliance, which I think is something that the establishment in the United States fears tremendously, and they backed off. And now they've gone in through the back door vis-a-vis ISIS.
Well, wait a minute here. I mean, you just glommed together 15 years of policy from two very different administrations. I mean, I will agree with you. There were definitely powerful people in the Bush administration in 2001, 2002 who wanted regime change in Iraq and Syria. You certainly are not implying that this sort of neocon fantasy is the policy of the Obama administration, are you?
I think that there's a great deal of continuity between the policies.
Okay.
You have, I mean, instead of extradition, you have massive drone strikes. So instead of kidnapping people and torturing them, you have executing people. And the Arab Spring came, and I think it's gotten more complicated. I think that you had the tremendous role of Al Jazeera and other Arab language media shift the Arab Spring to the secular regimes rather than the monarchies that the major media, that the major Arabic media was tied to.
Patricia, I want to get back to the recent British action, and as we talked about the vote in the British Parliament to conduct airstrikes against Syria. Well, David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, was asked, will these airstrikes, will this military action that you're taking undermine any kind of political solution to this problem? Let's take a listen to what he said.
No, the strikes actually help to bring about a political settlement because, of course, the strikes take the action to Daesh, which is everybody's enemy, and we do need to have a moderate opposition in Syria that can be part of the future government of Syria. So the political process and the action against Daesh to keep us safe at home, they go hand in hand.
Cameron says airstrikes are going to help.
If airstrikes could only help everything, that would be, right, the answer. I think this is a free-for-all almost of everybody out there just deciding to use Syria as a battleground. There are a lot of international legal questions as to whether or not these strikes inside of Syrian territory, which is a sovereign nation, by the way, are legal on an international agreement basis. So Russia is absolutely legal within its context only because it has been invited by the sovereign government. So if you're looking at staying within the context of international agreements and law, the United States, Britain, France are just, and Turkey for that matter, are just practicing illegal warfare.
So this is illegal, right?
Yeah, in a sovereign country, it's absolutely.
And the other point one should make about David Cameron's statements was that last October, when Russia announced that it was going to be entering this war, he said that that is going to lead to further radicalization and increased terrorism.
I think it's leading to that, exactly. And what it's led to is I think there is a containment of IS within the context of the Syrian territory. But what you're seeing now is almost a morphing between IS and Al-Qaeda, where they're saying, okay, if we can't, make people miserable here, we'll join up with these guys and go more globally and carry out attacks like in Paris and other places that we've seen. We're not sure about California yet, but it seems to be along the same lines.
Right, John, do you agree that these strikes are illegal?
Absolutely not. I mean, this is. We just heard a defense of Russian strikes on very flimsy ground. I assure you that what NATO powers are doing is something. If the Russians wanted to stop, they're well within their power to do so, and they're choosing not to.
So is the US.
What is the legal basis for the, let's say, British and US airstrikes?
I'm not an international attorney. You'll have to ask one. But the notion that what the Russians are doing is okay because the sovereign government of Syria has said it's okay is ridiculous. The sovereign government of Syria doesn't control more than a third of its own territory. And where these bombing strikes are happening is in bandit country that is governed by no one except, to an extent, ISIS. So spare me the international legal happy talk. If the Assad regime could control its territory, there wouldn't be much need to bomb ISIS there, would there? No, there would not. I have real doubts about about the Western bombing campaign on grounds of efficacy, but the facts simply are that ISIS, which is not at all Al-Qaeda, and there is no movement or convergence between them, despite what was just said.
Yes, there
On
are.
at a tactical
Absolutely.
level in certain places, yes. Big picture, absolutely not.
Absolutely, there
Look,
are.
the bomb. Okay, so you believe in a great jihadist conspiracy. That's fine, great.
I'm not talking about a conspiracy. I'm talking about opportunity. And the people will find opportunities in order to be able to expand, and that's part of their information operations, is that they are expansionists and they're gaining more territory. So they're going to look at opportunities like they have with Boko Haram and others in the region in order to make it seem like they are gaining more territory.
Well, you'll have to tell the AQ and ISIS people to stop killing each other in so many places then, because that's actually what's happening.
All right.